So last year I made a few videos about the incredible Kerbal space program mod Outer Planets, which is fairly self-explanatory. It adds several new planets and moons that are even more distant from the Sun than Eeloo, which is the most distant planet in stock KSP. The new planets are the gas giant Sarnus, a Saturn analogue, two ice giants called Erlem and Neidon, 3 guesses what those might be inspired by in real life, and finally Plock, the smallest and most distant planet that's a tribute to Pluto. Now so far I've made a video going to Plock and its moon, as well as 3 videos visiting the Sarnus system, one to showcase Tecto, probably the best overall destination in the Outer Planets mod, another going to the moon Slate, a destination I consider harder to do round trips to than Tylo, using a Saturn V replica, and then finally the Sarnus 5 mission, where I landed on every single moon in the Sarnus system and returned to Kerbin without the use of mining or Kraken drives. And then several months went by, and I sort of forgot that I had Outer Planets installed, but as I was thinking about what sort of video I wanted to make this week, I suddenly felt inspired to go out and do some proper exploring and visit somewhere that I've never gone to before. There are 2 planetary systems left for me to explore in Outer Planets, Neidon and Erlem, and I was drawn to Neidon as, I don't know, it just looks cooler, and there's something I find out its real-life counterpart, Neptune, so exciting. So I set about building the craft that's coming together on screen, a massive rocket that can take a crew of 3 Kerbals to the Neidon system without using gravity assists, where we will deploy a science pod into the ice giant's clouds, never to return, but will beam back lots of science during its descent, as well as a lander that can land on every single moon in the Neidon system, which sounds impressive, but there are only 2 moons, but one of them is a particularly cool destination, as it has an atmosphere, and the other moon is in a very high and eccentric orbit, which obviously presents its own challenge. So yeah, this is going to be a big mission, something that was probably evident by this video's runtime. If you want a kind of too long didn't watch version, then check out the video description, as I'm planning to make a companion video to this one that's much shorter and set to music, so there'll be a link in the description for that. Also, whilst you're down there, I must point you to the Patreon and YouTube members links in the description, as if you're subscribed on either platform, then you will have access to an ad-free version of this video, and in the description of that will be a download link to this here craft file. Speaking of the craft file, I haven't really said anything about it because I hope that kind of my little intro spiel just there and the footage kind of said enough for you to kind of understand what was happening. But the long and short of the details is that it's an entirely stock vehicle, except for a couple of parts there from the Stocker-like Station Parts Expansion Redux mod by Nissee. It's the little gravity ring, the centrifuge, and then there are 2 adapter pieces to kind of make it the right diameter for the rest of the rocket. Those are the only kind of modded pieces to my knowledge. The rest is entirely stock. So if you do download this craft file, then just be aware you will need the Stocker-like Station Parts Expansion Redux mod by Nissee. Gosh, I hate how long that name is. Anyway, we're now going to take what we've built so far and use cheats to teleport our vessel to Thatmo, one of the moons of Neidon, because I wanted to make sure we would have a connection to the Kerbal Space Center. And as you can see, we do not. So I was like, right, we're going to have to add a few more communications dishes in order to kind of boost our connection. So I did this several times, adding more and more dishes to our craft. And hey, look at that. With 15 communications relay dishes, that gives us a tiny signal that can get us back to the Kerbal Space Center, basically. So now I'm sort of clipping all of those dishes together so that we can maintain signal. The reason why it's so important is because just above those dishes you can see that little science pod that's going to drop down into the atmosphere of Neidon, never to return. That needs to be able to beam back its data somehow, and I couldn't really fit the dishes to the pod itself. So the pod has a relatively modest antenna, and then it basically communicates to this vehicle here that then relays the signal back to the Kerbal Space Center. So that's why it was so important to have the connection to the KSC, even though we do have Jebediah coming on board, who is a pilot, so we can do things like plot maneuver nodes, even though we don't have signal to the Kerbal Space Center. I've added this little escape pod to the top of the stack, just in case we need to do a launch abort. I want the Kerbals to be able to get free of the thing and not just explode along with the vehicle, so that's why there's that separate command pod at the top of the stack. That's our launch escape pod, and then once we've established orbit, the Kerbals can just EVA out and board the main spacecraft, whilst the pod itself can just re-enter and land. Anyway, we are now in the tracking station because it's important that we are launching at a Neidon transfer window. You can see how far, look at Joule's orbit around the sun. It's like the innermost visible planet there. And then look at Neidon. It's so far away. So you can't really eyeball it. So I'm using a mod called Kerbal Alarm Clock just because I like it. I think there is a stock version of it now, but I'm just more used to Kerbal Alarm Clock. So that's how I calculated our transfer window. Now we're going to zoom down and yeah, The Kerbals got a very, 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 very long journey ahead of them. So don't worry, I've given them some books. I gave them a book. I gave them one book. But, you know, they can just read slowly. Reading's great. I love reading when I'm not gaming, to be honest, so I have to shout out Hungry Minds. They've sponsored this video, and they sent me their amazing book, The Ultimate Guide to Rebuilding Civilization. Consider that you've been sent back in time to the Middle Ages, but knowing everything we know today, could you actually accelerate society and build modern technology from scratch, like electricity, engines, medicine, communications, not just in concept, but actually do it? That's exactly what this book is about. It's a huge, incredibly illustrated encyclopedia that breaks down humanity's most important inventions, step by step, and of course verified by experts. And when I say it's huge, I mean it. This thing weighs over 2 kilograms, with every page packed with handcrafted illustrations depicting early tools all the way to complex machinery. Over 5,000 hours was sunk into its creation, and it really shows. They've already sold over 400,000 copies worldwide, and for me personally, I found this is a great book to leave out on display because everyone wants to pick it up. So if you want to check it out, grab one using my code MATTLOWNE10 for a nice 10% discount. Link is in the description and QR code is on screen. Massive thanks to Hungry Minds for sponsoring today's video. And we are off. And yes, I'm playing on my save file that has Kerbal constructs installed, so I'm using KSP Enhanced by Mirrors of Witch. If I remember to put a link in the description, I will. That's why my Kerbal Space Toaster looks all big and epic like that. So yeah, but as you can see, we are rapidly leaving it behind as we get towards the cloud layer. But yes, I always get a bit intimidated when I'm faced. So the way I make videos is I put all the footage on my Vegas Pro timeline, speed it up and make it like more punchy. Like if I had to do a quick load, I'll cut out the bit where it went wrong, so it's all like nice and seamless. And then I'll sit and look at the timeline and be like, right, I will need to commentate for 35 minutes or whatever. And when it's more than like 40 minutes, or in this case it's basically an hour, isn't it? I'm like, oh gosh, I'm quite known for like going off on tangents and struggling to maintain trains of thought for videos that are like 10 minutes long. So, well, you can comment below what sort of timestamp do you think everything's going to go just wrong and I just completely collapse mentally and the whole thing becomes a complete chaotic stream of consciousness. One could say we have reached that point right now, but I like to think that I keep it together for a little bit. I guess these sort of parts in the video are always quite difficult to narrate because basically all of my Kerbal Space videos start with an ascent from Kerbin, so there are already really so many ways I can talk about the same thing over and over again. But what I can say right now is we're about to stage as our Delta V is about to drop to 0. And there we are. Ignition of stage 2 has commenced. We've got our Rhino engine here burning, pointing downwards really just to raise our periapsis without raising our apoapsis too much further. Yeah, now as you can see, we don't have quite enough Delta V in this stage to actually reach a stable orbit, which is what I didn't want to reach a stable orbit because I want to drop this lower stage and have it just burn back up in the atmosphere and not get left as perpetual space debris. But this gives us a bit of a challenge, right? Because A, we've got to get all 3 Kerbals from the kind of command pod at the top of the stack into the command pod of the spacecraft itself. I could just transfer them, but I feel like that's not very realistic because there's only that tiny little docking port that separates them, and there's actually an actual gap between the 2 vessels, so that wouldn't work in real life. And also we need to get a Kerbal into the lander, which is currently sitting at the very bottom of the stack. For some reason I decided to do this Apollo style. I don't know why. I could have sandwiched it in between the top 2 command pods. I think it's just like a force of habit. I'm just very set in my ways of always doing Apollo style. I really should try and explore alternate ways of doing things. In fact, I do think I did things differently for one of my other Outer Planets videos. When I went to Plock, I'm pretty sure I didn't make the video Apollo style. I didn't make the craft Apollo style. And by Apollo style, I of course mean having the lander below the mothership. We have to do this kind of reconfiguration. Anyway, I say that this is all a bit of a challenge because we don't have much time to our apoapsis. We need to do all of this reconfiguration, detach the ships and everything, and then circularize before reaching apoapsis, if that makes sense. So our apoapsis is currently 24 seconds away and rapidly dropping. So I need to quickly get the ships together, point ourselves prograde, and then fire up our nuclear engines before we end up going going too far past our apoapsis, and we end up dropping down into the atmosphere. So kind of intense. In fact, as you can see, if you can see the Kerbal engineer readout to the top left, to the left of the altitude gauge, we have actually passed apoapsis, and we're now descending, and we're only 5 kilometers above the atmospheric border. So we need to chop here, and this thing turns about as fast as a merry-go-round, as you can see, and the nuclear engines have very poor thrust-weight ratio, so I was a bit like, oh, are we gonna make it? Like, this would be like the shortest mission ever if we don't even make it to a circular orbit, but thankfully we did, just by the skin of our teeth. Oh, there's the camera doing its little weird wobble thing, so yeah, ooh. And there we are. Periapsis of 70 kilometers and apoapsis of like over 100 because of the fact we had to do such a late burn. So now we've done the kind of most important, the most critical part of the mission thus far. We've circularized. We can now get to deorbiting this thing. So I don't know why I used the launch escape tower and then also added separate engines. I think maybe I was just tired or something when I was designing the craft. I've got no answers for you guys. So we're going to deorbit it, and then we can just have it land, and it can be reused. It's like a reusable pod, because although it's got an ablative heat shield, which is technically single use, ablator is really, really overpowered in this game, so we can just reuse the heat shield over and over again a few times. But I got a bit trigger happy with physics time warp, and the parachutes got shredded. So I was like, oh, no worries, we can use these engines to land safely. So as you can see, we're coming down at a nice, safe speed. And then the footage cut off for some reason, but I want to assure you guys that we landed safely, that craft could be reused. I mentioned earlier that we can reuse the ablative heat shield. I forgot that I jettisoned it, but whatever. They're fairly cheap. It was great. It all went perfectly fine. So, as you can see, we have now cut back to the main spacecraft, which we're going to be using for the rest of this mission, as if that even needed saying. Now we're going to plot our journey to Neidon. So as you can see, we have a kind of we have like an asparagus style setup here, so we can continually drop fuel tanks while leaving all the remaining fuel tanks full. Now our first set of fuel tanks, they have 581 meters per second of delta V in them, because basically I'm going to split our escape burn from Kerbin into two. So we're going to do one burn that's just short of 581 meters per second, then we'll time warp to apoapsis, drop our periapsis to be inside Kerbin's atmosphere, then we can drop our first set of fuel tanks, then we'll quickly raise our apoapsis, and then perform our second burn that's going to get our apoapsis around the sun to about the height of Neidon. We will need to do a course correction burn because Neidon is at a slightly inclined orbit around the sun, but we'll just address that later on. So here we are, commencing burn 1 of 1. As you can see, we have 581 meters per second at this stage, so I went for a 565-ish meters per second burn, just so we had enough fuel to perform our kind of atmospheric insertion burn. Not that it really mattered because the engines will still be fully fueled, but I just wanted to kind of keep things as efficient as possible. And look at that, thanks to the power of video editing and the way that I can speed the footage up, basically. Burn's done in no time, so now we're going to go ahead and just do the thing I said I was going to do, right? We can, time warp up to apoapsis, point ourselves retrograde, which handily happened automatically because we were holding prograde when I initiated time warp, and there we are, dropping to a periapsis of 54 kilometers, which I think is low enough for the game to register the fact those fuel tanks have entered the atmosphere and thus will despawn them. And yeah, there we are. So they're detaching very slowly. I wanted the force percent to be only minimal so that their orbits wouldn't change significantly and they would definitely still enter the atmosphere. Sometimes when I stage and I want things to go on a collision course, the kind of force of the decoupler ends up changing their periapsis height to the point where they won't actually collide with something anymore. So that's why they detached very, very slowly. And yeah, we've now obviously raised our own periapsis to 91, nearabouts, kilometers above the surface, which I thought would be enough to perform our escape burn without dropping our periapsis too low and go within the atmosphere. As it turned out, it wasn't. We do briefly enter Kerbin's atmosphere during this burn here, basically, but it's only like 1 kilometer, so it wasn't significant. But yeah, it was a bit of another bit of a moment where I was like, oh, is the mission over before it's even begun? So yeah, 2020, oh no, it's changed now, never mind. 2037.8 meters per second. Then doing like another burn on our course to make sure we are going to get a Neidon encounter. There we are, we got a Neidon encounter there. And yeah, so it changed again. So now it's 251.5 meters per second. Now, before we commence this burn, I'm just going to set up our inflatable centrifuge module, which, as mentioned earlier, is one of the only modded parts, the other being the adapters on either side of the centrifuge. Again, comes from the Stocker-like Station Parts Expansion Redux mod. I have to have the name of this mod written down like a notepad file, and I just refer to this whenever I have to say the name of it, because I always say it slightly wrong, but that's what it is. I'm sure if you just type in on Google Station Parts Expansion mod Kerbal Space Program, it will come up, because it is one of the most used mods in this game. But yeah, that's the centrifuge there. I decided to have the centrifuge because obviously this is going to be a very, very, very long mission. Missions to places like Plock can often take in excess of 100 years. Don't worry, we don't take that long on this particular mission, but most journeys to any of the outer planets end up being very, very long. So what are the centrifuge there so that the Kerbals can have a larger living space, and they're in simulated gravity. Well, I guess real gravity, right? Because it's a centrifuge. So they'll won't suffer things like glaucoma, bone atrophy, that sort of thing. So that's kind of why I have the centrifuge there. We will do a little tour of it in a second, but first of all, I'm just going to make sure that the burn we've just done is good enough to get a Neidon encounter. And yeah, okay, we kind of overshot a little bit on the prograde vector, but I think by and large that's fine. It's going to cost us less than 100 meters per second to get ourselves a Neidon encounter during our time in interplanetary space. So there it is there. So this is the first time I'm starting showing off the planets, the moons of Neidon. So we've got that close moon, the white one, that's Thatmo, the bigger and more interesting of the two in my opinion. And the other one it has a different name, and I've forgotten what its name is. It's like Nissee. I'm going to go with the Wikipedia page. Nissee. Nissee is the other. This is a great commentary, isn't it? So yeah, it's Thatmo and Nissee are the two moons of Neidon, and Neidon itself can't land on it because it's an ice giant. But again, we're going to send down that little. I like to call them science bombs. Like this is going to descend a bit like the Cassini probe when it completed its mission around Saturn. NASA just dropped it into Saturn's atmosphere, and it just spent all that time broadcasting as much data as it could before it obviously succumbed to the aerodynamic stresses of entering Saturn's atmosphere. So now we have switched to, is this Bill coming or Bob coming? One of them. To do the little tour of the centrifuge. So we start off in the kind of sleeping quarters. We've got 3 beds for our 3 Kerbals. That worked out well. I'd never actually used this part before. I just hoped it would have enough sleeping area, like enough beds for 3 Kerbals. Although I guess they could just rotate, couldn't they, if necessary. We've got a little kitchenette just here. There's a little television area with some seats. And we've got our lavatory here as well as a fire extinguisher. By the way, in case you don't know about this, the way I'm able to kind of do this walking around thing inside the pod is using the free IVA mod. Lets you walk around. It should be stock. It's great. It's game changing. I love it. Get the free IVA mod. It's brilliant. Then we got our laptop there running Windows 7, best version of Windows, RIP. And then we're back here in the bedroom area. So we've got our 3 berths just there. I did think about, well, I didn't just think about it, I then did it. Oh, I'll just show you kind of what the center of the centrifuge looks like. It's not really anything exciting, but I thought if we're going to make this tour, a complete one, we should probably show every room in the centrifuge, which must include, obviously, the central hub. Now, one of the downsides to this particular centrifuge is that it doesn't have any windows, but I figured that, most of the time there's not going to be much to see for the Kerbals, right? They're just going to be looking into the blackness of space, and if they wanted to, they could just, transfer to this area and then into the main mothership command pod, which is obviously got the lander attached to it as well, where there are windows. Now, there was no way of actually transferring using the free IVA mod, because unfortunately we have that ablative heat shield underneath the command pod, which blocks free IVA access. I don't think it's too much of a stretch, though, to say it would be possible in real life. I think it was the Gemini program, I want to say. NASA did actually experiment with ablative heat shields that had hatches on them. I think it was Gemini. I could be wrong. If I'm wrong, then someone will comment below. But I'm pretty sure it was Gemini where NASA experimented with the idea of having ablative heat shields with hatches in them. So we could, in theory, IVA if that existed in Kerbal Space Program. So anyway, now we are here performing our mid-course correction burn to get that Neidon encounter. I think I overshot it slightly, so we didn't get it perfect, but we are now, as you can see, our orbit does indeed pass into Neidon's sphere of influence. So I'm going to now make another maneuver node that's going to encounter with Thatmo. Now, I kind of got things a little bit wrong here. So as you can see, there's our little encounter nodes there. I'm trying to encounter Thatmo just here, but the problem is that we're actually passing on the wrong side of Neidon. I'm going to be orbiting Neidon with its rotation, because ordinarily that's just best practice, but I hadn't yet realised that Thatmo actually orbits Neidon retrograde, something no other moon in KSP does, to my knowledge, though I don't know for certain of this, which means that to efficiently capture Thatmo, we need to also be passing Neidon retrograde, or against its rotation, because otherwise we'll end up encountering Thatmo basically head-on against its orbital motion, and for moon encounters what really matters is not so much the planet's rotation, but the spacecraft's velocity relative to the moon itself. And because Thatmo is already moving very quickly around Neidon, approaching it in the opposite direction means our relative velocity is very, very high, roughly the spacecraft's arrival speed on top of Thatmo's orbital speed. To capture into orbit or even significantly bend our trajectory, that entire relative velocity has to be cancelled, which makes capture much, much, much more expensive in terms of delta V. So I will course correct, so instead we will enter the Neidon system in the opposite direction to its rotation, but matching Thatmo's retrograde orbits. That our encounter results in a much cheaper capture burn because our velocity would partially match Thatmo's motion, dramatically reducing the relative speed at closest approach. And as you can see, that's exactly what I've just plotted. We now have a new maneuver node that's going to get us an encounter so that we're entering Neidon retrograde against its rotation, but obviously with Thatmo's orbital direction. So we're just going to time warp to that maneuver node and then get ready to execute the burn. So there we are. I hope that was... I'm no astrophysicist. I did biology. So if there are any holes in this explanation, then I welcome more enlightened and educated people to leave comments down below. But I'm just watching the map screen and we are now approaching our encounter with Neidon. Here we go. Any moment now. There we are. We have now entered Neidon's sphere of influence. So, big old planet, ice giant, so it's a very large sphere of influence. So it still takes quite a while to get down to the point where we are now we can see it just about there. Where is it? There it is. So it looks like Eve, kind of, because it's purple and round, and that's it, really. So there we are. There's Thatmo ahead of us. We're just going to wait until we get close enough that we enter Thatmo's sphere of influence, and then we can perform our capture burn. And there we are. We are entered. Now, Thatmo does have an atmosphere, so we have to be careful not to get too close to it when we perform our kind of circularization burn. At the moment, we're on a collision course, so that I can stage the fuel tanks, which we've just done here. So the fuel tanks will now crash into the surface of Thatmo and not get left as permanent space debris. In retrospect, what I probably could have done was attach all of our communications dishes to one of these kind of spent stages and have it circularized, and then we have like a permanent big relay network as far out as Neidon. So for future missions, we haven't got to bring 15 dishes just on our mothership. But whatever. It's the lesson we can learn. We can apply some other time, I guess. Anyway, let us now time warp down. So yeah, so it's going to be a 385 meters per second burn. I think on the original plan, before I realized my mistake about going into a retrograde orbit rather than a prograde orbit, I think it was like 1,200 meters per second. So it was like it was like a kilometer per second more expensive entering Neidon retrograde. So that's kind of the difference there. I can't remember what the exact numbers are, so I could just be pulling that out of thin air, but I'm pretty sure it was about that. So yeah, now this is a science mission, so we're actually going to run some science experiments. I've deflated our gravity ring because I wanted to deploy our magnetometer to get some magnetometer science, I guess. And although it kind of works in Kerbal Space Program, the magnetometer was clipping into the spinning centrifuge, which didn't think was that realistic. So although I'd retract the centrifuge just while we've got the magnetometer extended, so that it doesn't look stupid, basically. The magnetometer is attached to the science bomb that's going to go down into Neidon, so we won't have it attached for much longer. So yeah, we've run our science experiments from space high above Thatmo. Now we're running them in space low to Neidon, and so yeah, that's why I'm just running the experiments again. I've also done some crew reports and EVA reports as well, so at the end of this mission we can see how much science I unlocked. Obviously it's all kind of meaningless because I have a fully unlocked tech tree at this point, but still it's nice to see how much science we would earn. How much do you think, if you think about it, how much do you think we should be getting if we do science on Thatmo, Nissee, and Neidon? Think about. I think at this point I've already said, write a comment below if X, Y, Z. So you can comment below if you want, but I feel like I can't say leave a comment about this too much more because otherwise there'll be too many. There'll be too many comments. So don't comment below this video. Just have the comment section to be as empty as possible. Yeah, great. So now I've tanked my YouTube statistics. We can now get on with the next part of the mission. So we're in a slightly eccentric orbit just so we can maximize the kind of range of our science bomb, because it now obviously needs to perform an escape burn from Thatmo, so we kind of want to be left in an eccentric orbit so that our escape burn is going to be very, very small. We do have quite a lot of delta V on board this thing. 500, it's started burning now, so I don't remember, but it's like 580, I think, meters per second, so way more than enough, just because I wanted to ensure that we'd be entering Neidon's atmosphere during the day, so that it's kind of like, because this is a visual medium, right? It's nice so that you can actually see things rather than just a black screen. And yeah, this kind of part of the mission was longer than I had hoped, because I kind of made a couple of blunders with the craft's design. So you'll see that unfold. But what I'm going to do is I've got the wiki page open for Neidon, and I can kind of I can read you the Wikipedia page of Neidon. So this is like, and then we can pretend that I'm actually analyzing the data that came from this pod. Wow, what a great idea for a video. So first of all, in-game, the Kerbal Astronomical Society has this to say about Neidon. Due to its distance from Kerbin, it wasn't until fairly recently that Kerbalkind discovered the Kerbal system's most distant planet. At first, scientists thought Neidon might be a purple rocky planet like Eve, but they quickly realized they were in fact looking at an ice giant similar to Lowne. Now, the KSP Wiki describes Neidon's atmosphere as a very cold, dense atmosphere that extends to an altitude of 260,000 meters and has an average molecular mass of 2.8 grams per mole. This indicates a composition of 80% hydrogen and 19% helium, and a small amount of methane may contribute to the purple colour. The upper atmosphere also has traces of hydrocarbons, carbon monoxide, and carbon dioxide. Like other atmospheres in the game, Neidon's atmosphere fades exponentially as altitude increases. The scale height varies with altitude. The pressure-altitude profile is globally constant and independent of temperature. Now, judging by density and planet models, it's interesting to note that the atmosphere in-game is only the outer layer. At sea level, the atmosphere of a realistic planet like Neidon would start to become gradually more liquid until it reached the icy mantle. There appears to be several layers in Neidon's atmosphere: a troposphere, where temperatures decrease with altitude, and a stratosphere, where temperatures increase with altitude. The boundary between the troposphere and stratosphere is called the tropopause, and occurs at an altitude of 25 kilometers. There is also a thermosphere, which begins around 100 kilometers and extends out to 160 kilometers. The deep purple and blue colors could be due to methane in the atmosphere, which absorbs red light. There is an extremely tilted magnetic field that indicates a magnetosphere that may be formed by convective fluids in the icy mantle or lower atmospheric regions, similar to Lowne. And with certain graphics mods, Neidon has rotating clouds. By observing the rotation of these clouds, wind speeds can be estimated to vary between 325 to 600 meters per second, which is the fastest wind speeds in the game. And thus concludes my verbatim reading of the KSP Wiki. Now, here you can kind of see the mistake I made, where I didn't have quite enough electric charge to be able to transmit back the atmosphere. Oh, and I'm destroyed by parachutes by crushing into my ablative heat shield as well. I didn't have quite enough electric charge to be able to transmit a full atmospheric analysis report. I naively assumed the Science Junior, which I've already transmitted the data back from, would require the greatest electrical demand. So I only tested this craft's ability to transmit the Science Junior back. And I was like, right, it can transmit the Science Junior, so surely it can transmit all the other experiments. In fact, at this point in the recording process, I still believe this. I thought maybe the Science Junior just literally got rid of all of our electric charge. I didn't check, and I just pressed broadcast, and that took us to 0. So let's get the batteries fully back to full charge, and then we'll have another go at broadcasting or transmitting back our data. Here we are, our atmospheric analysis. Let us upload and see if we get the full report back now that we have the full capacity, 1,815 units of electric charge. Oh, painfully close. We got to 91%. I'm like, oh, great. So now I've got to spend another huge amount of time for me in real life waiting for the RTG on board to slowly replenish our electric supply. So as you can see just then, blink and you miss it, I've right-clicked the antenna and clicked the button that says allow partial, which means that we can kind of upload the transmission in multiple chunks basically. So once we run out of electric charge, we'll carry on broadcasting, and the broadcast will just resume every time we have sufficient electric charge basically. So watch it go down to 0. There we are. As you can see, it's sort of now yeah, there's no real visual indicator. But basically, it's sort of still transmitting whenever we get just enough electric charge back from the RTG. And there we are. We have now broadcast that signal back. So now, let's speed the footage up again massively, and we can get those batteries back to full, and we can transmit back the rest of our science experiments. I was getting a little bit nail biting at this point, because I'm like, oh, when are we going to reach crush depth and be destroyed? So I'm going to quickly review our temperature and data. There we are, that was uploaded fine. Then we can find the other experiment, the barometer, and transmit that back. And there we are. Everything is now broadcast back. So again, this was the importance of having all those relay dishes on the mothership, because although we've got a powerful antenna on this thing, it cannot reach the Kerbal Space Center on its own. We need the relay that's on board the mothership that's currently in orbit of Thatmo. Just out of curiosity, I wanted to see if you could run a magnetometer experiment. I don't know why, because you can't run that outside of atmospheres, outside of the vacuum of space, I should say. So then we just said, right, let's just cut the parachutes and see how long it takes for our spacecraft to reach crush depth. So again, speed the footage up massively. Oh, it's getting awfully dark, and then yeah, a bit anticlimactic because I had it on times 20 physics warp. But yeah, there we are. RIP to our science bomb. And then we can just continue the kind of more exciting parts of this mission, right, which are the 2 surface landings we're going to be doing, both on Thatmo and on Nissee. So, yeah, we'll just go ahead and do that. I mean, I guess I could do what I did earlier with Neidon and just read you some of the interesting tidbits about Thatmo. So, yeah, I can just read that to you whilst you watch. Kind of first of all, we need to go down into a low Thatmo orbit with our mothership. Then we'll get Jebediah Kerman and Bob Kerman onto the lander, although it looks like Bob Kerman is actually already on the lander, isn't he? We'll get Jebediah on board as well, and the 2 will go down to the surface and do all the stuff that you would do on a surface mission to KSP. So, on a surface mission in KSP, so like, you know, doing the science experiments in the high atmosphere, low atmosphere, then on the surface. All that good stuff. Anyway, yeah, so Thatmo is the first moon of Neidon and is the Triton analog to the game, and it has a thin atmosphere. Its inclined, uniquely retrograde orbit makes reaching the moon challenging, especially when transferring from Neidon's other moon, Nissee. Although, obviously you guys and myself knew about that part because of the issues I had earlier where I was going to be encountering Thatmo the wrong way, because at that point I wasn't aware it had a retrograde orbit. Then I realised and course corrected, and so yeah, that wasn't new information. Hopefully this next part will be new to you. The in-game Kerbal Astronomical Society description of Thatmo is as follows. This icy moon was found to have a very thin atmosphere, just thick enough to support aerodynamic flight. It has been the #1 destination on every daredevil aviator's bucket list ever since. Oh, and it rotates in the opposite direction around its planet as every other moon. Quite the strange moon indeed. The KSP Wiki says this of Thatmo's atmosphere. It's a very thin, freezing atmosphere, extending up to 35 kilometers above sea level. Barely enough to register as an atmosphere at all. While present and just about able to slow craft down before reaching the surface, parachutes cannot be deployed in the near vacuum, the sea level pressure of which is just over 1/7 of Juno's, but over 500 times the pressure found on real-life Triton, and similar to that in the lowest elevations of Mars. I've interrupted the wiki description here to say that might be a little bit misleading, because you can use parachutes. I used parachutes for this lander in this mission, and as you'll see in a second, they worked very well. But you gotta treat it a bit like landing with parachutes on Juno. It can be done, but you will need to supplement the descent with engines as the atmospheric drag is not really high enough to safely land with parachutes alone. Anyway, the Wikipedia page, or not Wikipedia, the KSP Outer Planets wiki page continues to describe Thatmo's atmosphere as follows. Given its real-life analog and the very low temperature, it can be assumed that Thatmo's atmosphere is largely nitrogen, as most other gases would either not be dense enough to form a substantial atmosphere or would freeze solid in the extreme cold. Thatmo's ice is presumably similar to its Tritonian counterpart in that it adopts a structure allowing it to sublime into gas at very low temperatures. Atmosphere analysis reports suggest mainly nitrogen and some ammonia and halogens like fluorine. The wiki page goes on to describe Thatmo's surface, which you can now see we're about to touch down on. Wait for it. Nearly there. Nearly there. Wait for it. It's about to happen. There we are, we have touched down. So yes, it describes the Thatmo surface as this. Owing to the fact that it is largely ice, Thatmo's surface is mostly undulating, with icy plains and some slab mountains stretching north to south across the frozen wastes. The surface also sports no large craters, and few, if any, smaller ones, due to either Thatmo's thin atmosphere providing some protection from impacts and wearing away craters, or cryovolcanic activity periodically refreshing the surface and then paving them over. Various surface science reports and the wrinkled nature of the topography, which suggests tectonic activity, lend weight to the latter theory, though the effect of the atmosphere cannot be discounted. And that concludes me once again just plagiarizing the wiki page. I should probably link, ethically, I should just link the wiki pages, because obviously someone else wrote that for my sources there. So yes, Jebediah Kerbal just clumsily falling off the lander here and going off to Great Bob. We can have a nice little photo opportunity, plant our Lowne aerospace flag, and yeah, just have a fun old time. And now, if you just install Outer Planets and nothing else, your Thatmo won't look like this. The ground here is looking very beautiful because I have Lynx's Parallax Continued installed, and I'm running the Outer Parallax kind of plugin that adds the parallax textures to the Outer Planets mod, the Outer Planets, moons, and planets. There's only one rocky planet in the Outer Planets mod, and that is, I forgot the name. Plock. That's it. Plock, the Pluto one. So anyway, we've planted our Lowne space. You can tell when I'm like not reading a script, right? When the change in just the clumsiness of my wording and general cadence of speech probably drops off quite dramatically there. So yeah, Jebediah coming can get back on board. There we are. And then Bob coming can get on board as well. I'm trying to experiment with like different ways of building stock landers in Kerbal Space Program, because there's only like so many parts, and I end up getting a bit set in my ways and just building landers that look exactly the same every single time. So going forward, I'm trying to kind of experiment with kind of using multiple command pods to make almost like custom looking pieces, trying to be a bit more creative, I think, with my lander design. So I hope you liked this one, this kind of dual pod lander thing. So yeah, I just set an action group there actually to make sure I was always controlling from the docking port, which is a center to the center of mass and center of thrust, rather than one of the command pods, just that we're being as accurate as possible during flight. So yeah, we're now launching from the surface. I repacked up our parachutes. I don't know why, just in case we need to perform an emergency landing or something, or just on the way up, if I saw something interesting, we can quickly retrograde burn and go land there and have a look at it. But it's as the wiki description that I read to you mentioned, Thatmo's surface is fairly kind of featureless, so there wasn't really going to be anything interesting to see. So yeah, just performing our ascent burn now to rendezvous with our mothership. Then we'll refuel the lander and then go to Nissee, the other moon of Neidon. Now, this lander does have quite high. Let me try that again. This lander has quite high fuel capacity, because when I designed it, I wasn't quite sure how effective parachutes would be, so I assumed we would need to have sufficient delta V to not just land entirely on engines, but also get back into orbit entirely with engines. And then I kind of had an idea where the mothership would stay in Thatmo orbit, and the lander would go off and land on the other moon, Nissee, and then return all under its own steam, and then the rendezvous. And then I don't know why, I just thought that idea was kind of fun, and when it came to testing the lander, making sure the numbers worked out, it was just a bit easier that way for me personally. So that's why I decided, that's what I almost did. That's why we have so much more extra fuel reserves on this lander. But it turned out that like going to Nissee would be a not multiple years, but over a year in terms of how long it takes to get there. So I thought we might as well just take the whole mothership, because we've got the fuel capacity on board, and the mothership obviously has the centrifuge, so the Kerbals can live in comfort. And speaking of the Kerbals living in comfort, if they just went on the lander, they'd be spending a year inside those tiny little individual pods. So, and obviously Bill Kerman would be pretty lonely on board the mothership. So I apologize, Kerbals, that I was almost so cruel. I will not do that. So yeah, I'm just doing the lazy way of getting back to our ship. As you can see, we're approaching it, and once we got nice and close, we'll just have both ships automatically target each other's docking ports, so we can have a nice, easy, RCS-less docking procedure. So yeah, now we just switch to the mothership and control from our docking port. We were already doing that, so that's fine. And then we just orient it so it's facing the lander's docking port. And as you can see, both ships are maintaining beautiful alignment, and then we can just burn towards the other ship. So that's all I have to say about that. And there we are, our space frogs have been reunited once again. Now, I don't think I actually transferred Jebediah or Bob back into the main ship. We just pretend that they have the ability to do that, and, you know, we can just imagine that for the rest of the journey, the Kerbal was kind of moving freely about the spacecraft, making use of the centrifuge ring and all that. Just practically speaking, it would have been a bit annoying to have to continually transfer Kerbals from the gravity ring back into the lander, etc., just for the sake of kind of adding a little bit of realism to the mission. So you could just use your imagination there. There's probably already some comment down below saying like, oh, Matt added all this stuff, but then the Kerbal was just sat in the main command pod and didn't move for the entire duration of the mission. I mean, how long has the mission been going on for now in Kerbal years? Wait to get back on board and we can find out. What I'm doing here is we've got Bob coming on EVA, just transferring our science from the lander onto the mothership, because of course the lander will not be being recovered when we go back to Kerbin. Only the kind of Apollo command pod there will be making it safely down to the surface, so we kind of need to make sure all the science is being stored in there. And yes, now we're back on board. We can see our mission so far has been 29 years and 66 days. So yeah, Kerbal time is like shorter than Earth time, so if this was a human mission in the human solar system, it wouldn't have been quite as long as 29 years. Someone could do the maths and let me know, but yeah, I'm going to talk about me being an idiot again. Can you see my mistake here? I forgot to disable the lander's engine. So we've got the 3 nuclear engines pushing against the Terrier engine, and I'm obviously wasting the fuel inside the lander that I had reserved for our Nissee landing. And I didn't even notice that entire burn. I just let the lander kind of, be a hindrance to our spacecraft. Luckily, the 3 nuclear engines provided greater thrust than the single Terrier, so it wasn't a big problem. But yeah, that was a bit of a whoops moment from me. So now we're going to plot a maneuver that's going to get us an encounter with Nissees, which, as you can see, is at a very, very high orbit and a very, very inclined orbit as well. In terms of actually landing on it, though, it's pretty easy. It's very similar to Gilly, in that Gilly is obviously the moon of Eve. It's a bit of a stretch to even call it a moon, isn't it? It's like a captured asteroid, isn't it? But Gilly is like this really high eccentric orbit around Eve. It's really annoying to get to, but once you're there, it's very, very easy to land on. And that's similar for Nissee. It's not quite as like low gravity as Gilly is, but it's still very, very easy to land on, basically. So we've plotted a burn that's going to get us an encounter with Nissee. So now I guess we can just time warp around and do that burn. I believe I have to do a mid-course correction burn as well to actually get our final encounter, but yeah, we're near enough. I'm just transferring a little bit of fuel into our outermost tanks because they were basically empty. Then once we encounter Neidon, we can stage them and have them crash into Neidon's surface. Again, making sure that no debris is left floating in space for all eternities. Here we are about to ignite our engines. There we are. As you can see, this time, at this point in the mission, I had noticed that the Terrier engine was still activated, so I disabled it and then didn't think that I for some reason never crossed my mind that the Terrier engine would have therefore been burning during our previous nuclear engine burn, and I would therefore need to top up its fuel tanks, like the lander's fuel tanks with a bit more oxidizer, a bit more liquid fuel to account for this. So I do my Nissee landing. I got down to the surface and I was like, wait, how have I got like no delta V left? This is ridiculous. This thing was designed for Thatmo, which requires much more energy to land on and take off from. So yeah, I got a bit confused, and then when I was reviewing the footage, when I was editing this video, I was like, oh my gosh, I forgot to shut down the Terrier engine. How embarrassing. Luckily, nobody's going to see this, not, tens of thousands of people. So, yes, laugh at, I bring shame upon my people. I fully accept that. Hand to God. You guys, my sincerest apologies, groveling. Yeah, anyway, so it's only a small mid-course correction burn, less than 10 meters per second, so not a very expensive burn at all. And then now we've done it, we can go to the map screen and have a look, see if we've got the encounter. Close enough, so now we can just do some puffs of our RCS thrusters to kind of fine-tune our... I thought we were going to do that anyway. It looks like we're using the nuclear engines. Oh, there we are. We switched to RCS. Yeah, now we're doing these correction burns using the RCS thrusters on board our lander. And of course, like I said earlier, we're going to start up on a collision course. We can drop our now empty drop tanks so that they crash into the surface and not get left in space forever in all perpetuity. And, I've already kind of done a bit of wiki reading for Neidon and for Thatmo. We can do the same sort of thing for Neidon, right? Whilst we're here, give me something to talk about rather than just mindlessly speculating. I can give you guys empirical facts and data. Yes. Nissee is the second and last moon of Neidon and is the Nereid analogue to the game. It orbits Neidon in a highly inclined and eccentric orbit and is very difficult to get to, especially from its retrograde orbiting oppositely inclined neighbour, Thatmo. Its in-game description from the Kerbal Astronomical Society describes it as a small moon in a highly inclined and eccentric orbit around Neidon. Its surface looks strangely similar to marble. As a result, it has become the envy of every sculptor on Kerbin. The wiki first describes the surface of Nissee. It has an unusually high density so far out in the Kerbal system, where most bodies contain large proportions of ice, instead being comparable to inner bodies like Kerbin. As such, Nissee is likely comprised of mostly rock, though a significant metallic core is unlikely given its location in the outer regions of the system. Moving on to its surface, Nissee's surface has colours ranging from beige in the uplands to white in the lower regions. Most of Nissee's large craters are concentrated around the huge Maximus crater, but much of the rest of the surface is a rough series of ridges and valleys, peppered by numerous small craters like on the Mun. The low gravity and challenging terrain make roving slow and hazardous, though the gravity, which is marginally lower than Minmus's, somewhat mitigates the difficulties of landing on the body. And now I've read all of that to you, you can now watch me attempt to land on the body. And yeah, I nailed it, it was easy. It's really, really easy to land on, to be honest, especially after Thatmo. Although, that being said, I guess you could argue Thatmo is easier to land on because you can kind of use parachutes to do, you know, the lion's share of deceleration and the engines for the very last moment. But yeah, whatever. I think most players of Kerbal Space Program, if you have the ability to make a ship that can get to the Neidon system circularized and then have a lander that mathematically has all of the correct fuel levels and thrust rate ratio to land on it, you will easily be able to do it, is what I'm saying, basically. So yeah, here we are descending, and yeah, it is a very, compared to the surface of Thatmo, which was very smooth, there was a little bit of undulation, as the wiki obviously enlightened us with that piece of information, but compared to this place, much more mountainous, much more rocky, lots of peaks and valleys. So I found this kind of little flat-ish area just here. A lot of ground scatter. Again, that's part of Parallax Continued, with the outer Parallax kind of thing added to it. Here we are touching down. And there we are. Coming to a rest in kind of this little rocky area. And we can get our Kerbals out on EVA, not just so that Bob Kerman, our scientist on board, can reset the Mystery Goo and the Science Junior experiment so that they can be run again. But also, obviously, to plant our flag, do an EVA report, and get a surface sample as well. So that's going to be the objectives that we do for this part of the mission. In fact, that's what I'm doing right now with Bob Kerman. He's taking the data and resetting the Science Junior and the Mystery Goo. Well, he's done the Mystery Goo, now he's going to do the Science Junior. There we are, collect data, now he's going to be restored. Perfect. So yeah, that's all I have to say about. Oh yeah, so we ran those when we were in space near to Neidon, I think, or Nissee, sorry. So yeah, I can run those experiments again. So yeah, now we've done all the important stuff. We have a little look around, survey our surroundings, and Bob Kerman has a fun old time using his jetpack there. Thanks to the low gravity, he can fly around like Iron Man. Well, I guess Iron Man didn't really have a jetpack, did he? Flying around like CJ from San Andreas, Grand Theft Auto. What a game. They don't make him play they used to. So yeah, we've done that. We didn't really need to get Jebediah Kerman out on EVA because Bob Kerman's kind of done everything we need him to do, but you know, it's nice to get Jebediah out, stretch his legs, and I think he can take the surface sample that Bob didn't get actually, yep. So yeah, just getting a nice little photo opportunity, and disable the UI, and then potentially this could be the thumbnail shot, although I'm probably going to use the view we got from Thatmo just because that's the more dramatic view. But maybe I'll use that as like a kind of an A/B testing thing, or maybe I can use it for the thumbnail of the Patreon edition of this video. I always try to make the thumbnail different so that people who are in my YouTube members page and Patreon can tell that it's the Patreon video, because it will say in big letters, this is the Patreon version, and the image is usually different as well. So yeah, fun fact if you wanted to know about what my Patreon videos look like. Yeah, there we are. So kind of this is a very precarious spot we've landed in. So that's our final landing of the mission, I guess. Technically there's going to be one more landing. We're going to be splashing down on Kerbin, but that's not really a landing, is it? It's a splashdown. So I guess you could call this our final solid landing in the mission. We've still got about 10 minutes left though. I mean, I did say at the very beginning, I always get a bit worried that I'm going to just go off the rails, just start rambling about utter nonsense, which people say they like, and people say that they missed my whiskey reviews as well. But then I also got a lot of complaints saying that, oh, Bart goes on these random tangents about whiskey, it doesn't make any sense. So for those that don't know the backstory of the whiskey reviews, to be fair, I've only made like 10 videos out of like 1,000 that had a whiskey review in them. This was like back in, I want to say 2017, I want to say. There was this thing called the Copper Act, which was Keep Online Children Online Protection Act. I don't know, I can't remember what it stood for. But basically, YouTube brought into this thing where if your video was supposedly made for children, it wouldn't have targeted ads on it, and you would basically effectively be demonetized. Like, you wouldn't really earn anything from your videos. So I wanted to make it very clear that these videos are not intended for children, and they're intended for mature audiences. So I started adding like a little whiskey review, because they're, but you know, that's completely inappropriate for a child to hear about. So having a whiskey review makes the video not for kids. So that's kind of why I did it. But I think I just stopped doing it because I ran out of whiskeys to talk about. Like, I'm not really a whiskey expert. I occasionally will see an interesting bottle in the shelf in the supermarket, but like, oh, I'm going to try that later. And then I'll try and remember what it tasted like to talk about. But that's basically the extent of my whiskey knowledge, really. So that was why I did that. I think copper it's all a bit died down now, and it's not as crazy as it used to be. But yeah, when it came out, I remember it was flagging channels left, right, and centre. It was a scary time. It was a scary time to be a YouTuber. So yeah, that was the purpose of the whiskey reviews. I don't know if I've had any whiskies since that I haven't ever reviewed. I think I had an American Eagle, I think it's called. I think I bought it on Black Friday on Amazon. There was a big discount on some bourbons, and American Eagle, that was quite nice. We got this Canadian whiskey, which I don't remember the name of, but I'm sure we type it. If it's one of the more popular ones, right? You know what? I'm gonna do things properly, right? I've opened the wiki page and plagiarized it, so that's a level of effort. Like, that's me doing research. I'm gonna go and open up my Amazon orders. Whiskey. Here we go. Okay, so I can confirm that the one I was talking about, it was called Eagle Rare Bourbon Whiskey. That was good, solid, 8 out of 10. It was nice. It's nothing like amazingly special, but it was good. And then the Canadian one we got was Bareface Whiskey, elementally aged triple oak Canadian whiskey. It had a cool bottle. The bottle's got like this bear claw scratch effect on the glass. That was primarily what drew me to try it. And also, I'd never tried Canadian whiskey before, and I was like, how will it differ from like the United States? So, Kentucky and Tennessee whiskey. I'm really sorry to all of my fellow members of the United Kingdom, but I much prefer Tennessee and Kentucky whiskies to Scottish and Irish whiskies, I'm afraid. I know, sacrilege. I live in Dartmoor as well in the UK, which has its own whiskey distillery as well. Maybe I should... if Dartmoor Distillery, if you want to sponsor me, then let me know. But yeah, there's a distillery here. I think that I've never tried it, so I can't comment on Dartmoor whiskey. But I just prefer the American bourbons. I don't know why. I like the Japanese stuff as well. I'd probably say I like American bourbon the most, then the Japanese stuff, then Scotch. I'm sorry. It's just I didn't choose to be born this way. This is just how God made me, all right? But yeah, talking about Bareface whiskey, I didn't really like it very much. Sorry, it was a bit sweet, a bit too sweet for me. That's my review. I can't. It was ages ago since I had it. I don't really remember what it tasted like. Just me and Beth decided, oh yeah, it's interesting. Let's not get this again. That was my review just there. So yeah, look at that. The whiskey reviews have been revived, and some justification has been provided as to why I even did them initially for those that didn't really enjoy them. So yeah, there we are. I mean, at this point, you're 50 minutes into a video. You're in it for the long run at this point. So hey, if you've not liked the video yet and you have been enjoying things, let's get my little mascot down there. There you go. You can drop a little like and subscribe as well. There we are. But yeah, we're just sorting out all the burns is going to get us out of the Neidon system, and yeah. Don't know if I'll come back, because I feel like the planets aren't, like, the moons I should say, aren't really that much to talk about, are they? I feel like there are other destinations in the Kerbal system I'd rather visit before coming back to Neidon, but I have enjoyed my time here, and I think, now I've done this video, there is an elephant in the room, isn't there? We need to go to Erlem, so maybe like next week or the week after, or maybe I'll leave it a couple of weeks so the videos aren't too samey. I will have to do a trip to Erlem. And do you want me to do it like this, where on my very first trip I land on every single moon of Erlem? I believe there are 4 moons of Erlem. I don't know if they're, like, difficult. Like, if they're all, like, Lathe or Tylo, then probably maybe I'll try it anyway. But I think I'm led to believe they're all kind of fairly easy to land on. So maybe a fun thing to do. We'll do the Erlem 4 for the next mission I do in Outer Planets. And I am also aware that Erlem itself has a very cool feature of its atmosphere. So Erlem is like Neidon, it's an ice giant, but I've been told that there is like a really cool like atmospheric canyon that would be really fun to fly through. So maybe I'll do a dedicated mission to that. So like I did my Joule Diver space station, was a space station that dives through the upper atmosphere of Joule, gathering lots of science. Really fun video, so fun, I did it twice. So we can do that again with like a dedicated mission where we just fly a space station through Erlem's atmosphere with like labs on board, so the Kerbals can really analyze things and get wonderful first-person views of Erlem's gaseous canyon. So I'm just switching to one of our satellites here because I noticed for the duration of this mission, our mothership hasn't been locking onto my interplanetary satellite network. It's just been kind of trying to connect directly to Kerbal, which is fine because it has the range, but obviously our signal has been pretty weak for the duration of this mission. I was like, well, couldn't it have connected to one of our deep space relay satellites to have a stronger connection? So I switched one of the satellites to make sure they were all still operational, and they were. They had electric charge. They could connect to things. So not really sure why our spacecraft wasn't pinging them, but I guess it didn't really matter in the end because we were ultimately able to sustain a connection to the Kerbal Space Center. And yeah, speaking of Kerbal, wait for it, there we are. We have now entered Kerbin's sphere of influence. Now we're at the very edge of Kerbin's sphere of influence, and we're already going faster than 4 kilometers per second. So by the time we get all the way down to kind of where the atmosphere starts, we're going to be coming in very, very, very fast. So the stuff that we're going to be expending is going to explode almost immediately. So of course, I'm going to stage as late as possible, so that we get all those explosions happening nice and close, so the Kerbals get a cool little fireworks display to celebrate their return home. So first we're going to point along the normal vector, just so that our the vessel is kind of either side of us, not above and below us, where it's going to pose a greater threat to us. And then I couldn't find the undock button on the docking port, so actually we hit the atmosphere pointed the wrong way, but luckily I was able to orient retrograde at the exact right moment, and look at that. Lots of fun explosions to conclude the mission, although of course once we splash down, the video won't just end. We will be having a look at all the science that we unlocked. So think about it now, lock into your head how many science points do you think we'll have got. There were probably parts I missed, like I don't think I ran any experiments in Neidon orbit, for example, or just when we entered Neidon's atmosphere. But yeah, and speaking of entering the atmosphere, we've actually skimmed out of Kerbin, so we have to do a swing around and re-enter once again, and this time we will definitely generate enough drag to put ourselves on a landing, basically. We're going to be splashing down, we're not going to be exiting the atmosphere this time. So so we'll recover the vessel and see how much science we got. Obviously, I don't think the science bombs data will be included in that because that was transmitted years ago at this point, like 30 years ago in game. Like we're now at year 62. 62 years, 409 days into the mission, so a long time ago. So hopefully the Kerbals received that ages ago and put that to good use. So that I don't know if it will be included in the tally or not. We'll have to just see. Unfortunately, it's coming down a bit dark, so let's just speed the bit up until we get to splashdown. Here we go. Speed everything up. We can deploy our heat shield as well, just to kind of soften our impact because we'll have a lower splashdown mass on board our spacecraft. I can see the water below us. Wait for it. We're going to splash down any second. There we are. A beautiful end to the mission. So we can recover the vessel. Let's see. So there we are. 7,912 science earned. So that, to be honest, that was more than what I was expecting. So pretty happy with that. And I'll leave you with this lovely little shot of my Kerbal Space Center. And of course, a list of names, my Patreon supporters and YouTube channel members who make all of this content possible. Thank you guys for sticking so long in this big, long video. And also, thank you so much to Hungry Minds for sponsoring. I was really excited when they reached out, to be honest, because I've been seeing this book advertised like on Instagram and stuff. So I was planning on buying it anyway. And they were like, oh, we'll send you one, we will sponsor your video. I'm like, great. Welcome aboard. So click the link in the description. But that's the end of the video. Thank you for watching and goodbye.